Billionaire dad sees Waitress helping his disabled son. What he does next will shock you. The rain fell in steady sheets, tapping against the glass windows of the Blue Jay Diner. The glow of neon lights flickered in the puddles outside, reflecting the quiet hum of the late-night city. Inside, the comforting aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon mixed with the sounds of clinking silverware and low conversations. Maya Thompson moved through the narrow aisles between booths, expertly balancing a tray stacked with steaming plates. The dinner rush had just died down, leaving behind a few scattered customers. A truck driver nursing a mug of black coffee, an elderly couple sharing a slice of pie, and a lone college student hunched over his laptop. Maya had worked at the Blue Jay Diner for years. She knew the rhythms of this place, the regulars who came in at the same time every night, and the way the jukebox in the corner occasionally skipped a beat. It wasn't the life she had dreamed of, but it was steady, familiar. Despite the exhaustion that clung to her limbs from another long shift, she always greeted her customers with warmth. Kindness cost nothing, and if there was one thing she understood, it was how much small gestures mattered. As she wiped down a counter, her gaze drifted toward the window. That's when she noticed him. A young boy, no older than 10, sat alone in a corner booth. His wheelchair was neatly tucked beside him, and his hands rested on his lap. He wasn't fidgeting or looking around impatiently, just staring out at the rain, his expression calm but distant, as though he had accepted the fact that he would be waiting for a long time. Something about the sight of him tugged at Maya's heart. She grabbed a menu and approached his table with a gentle smile. "Hey there, sweetheart, you waiting for someone?" The boy looked up at her with big, intelligent eyes. His brown hair was slightly damp, as if he had been outside not too long ago. "My dad's supposed to pick me up," he said quietly, "but he's late." Maya's grip on the menu tightened slightly. She had seen this kind of thing before. Kids left waiting at school pickup zones, sitting alone in booths, hoping that someone would remember them soon. She glanced toward the door, then outside into the rain. No one seemed to be rushing toward the diner. "Have you been waiting long?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated. "A little while." Maya exhaled through her nose, her decision already made. She turned on her heel and walked toward the kitchen window. "Frank, give me a short stack of pancakes," she called to the cook. Frank, a gruff older man with a salt and pepper beard, raised a bushy eyebrow. "For table 7? He gestured vaguely toward the boy. "Yeah," Maya said. "It's on me." Frank didn't argue. Within minutes, she had a plate of warm, fluffy pancakes drizzled with syrup and topped with a dollop of butter. She returned to Evan's table and set it in front of him. "On the house," she said with a wink. "Can't have you waiting on an empty stomach, right?" Evan blinked up at her in surprise, as if no one had ever done something like this for him before. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared. He picked up his fork, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. "Anytime, kid." As she turned to tend to another table, she didn't notice the expensive black car parked just outside, nor the man inside it watching the exchange unfold with keen eyes. But he had noticed her. And soon, Maya's life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The sleek luxury car sat quietly on the rain-soaked curb outside the Blue Jay Diner. Its polished surface mirrored the neon glow of nearby streetlights, while the windshield wipers methodically swept away the relentless drizzle. Seated in the driver's seat, Noah Sinclair stared out through the glass, his eyes fixed on the small scenes unfolding inside the diner. His fingers tapped a slow, measured rhythm on the steering wheel, a subtle cadence that mirrored the beat of his own conflicted thoughts. Noah was a man accustomed to precision. As the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, every moment of his day was meticulously planned, every meeting scheduled down to the minute. He prided himself on punctuality and control, traits that had served him well in the ruthless world of business. Yet tonight, the unexpected delay of an overrunning board meeting had forced him into uncharted territory, a pause in his usually relentless schedule. When he finally pulled his car up outside the diner, his initial expectation was to see his son, Evan, upset or frustrated by the delay. Instead, what he witnessed was something profoundly different. Through the large front window, Noah saw Maya Thompson, a young waitress whose presence illuminated the otherwise dim interior of the diner. She was engaged in an act of genuine kindness, tending not to a high-profile guest or an important client, but to a small boy in a wheelchair who sat alone at a booth. Noah leaned forward, squinting slightly against the rain as he observed the scene. Maya had just set a plate of warm pancakes in front of the boy, a simple gesture that transformed an ordinary moment into something far more meaningful. Her caring smile and gentle tone resonated deeply with him. Here was someone who offered compassion unconditionally, without expecting anything in return. In that instant, it became clear to Noah that Maya's act was not just a fleeting kindness, but a reflection of a rare and sincere empathy. Throughout his career, Noah had been surrounded by people with ulterior motives: investors seeking profit, executives jockeying for power, and so-called friends who valued his influence over genuine connection. But as he watched Maya interacting with his son, he saw a refreshing contrast. Here was a person who cared purely out of the goodness of her heart, unburdened by the weight of hidden agendas. Noah's mind raced as he considered the implications of what he had just witnessed. The image of Maya's unwavering kindness lingered long after he had pulled up his car. In a world where business often trumped compassion, she represented a spark of hope, a reminder that even in the most calculated environments, genuine human connection could still prevail. That evening, as the rain continued its steady dance on the car roof, Noah made a decision that would alter the course of both his life and Maya's. He realized that the qualities of empathy and authenticity were far too precious to overlook. With a resolute nod to himself, he resolved to ensure that this moment of kindness would not go unnoticed. The choice was clear. He would seek out Maya Thompson and offer her an opportunity that might just change her life, and by extension, the future for both his son and the people around him. In that quiet, rain-soaked pause outside the diner, Noah Sinclair embraced a rare vulnerability. He understood that true leadership sometimes meant reaching beyond the confines of conventional business strategies, into the realm of heartfelt human values. And as he started his car, his decision was made. A decision that would eventually lead him to invite Maya into a world of possibilities far removed from the cold, calculated corridors of corporate power. The morning rush at the Blue Jay Diner had just ended, leaving behind the scent of freshly brewed coffee and syrup-soaked pancakes. The hum of chatter had faded, and the only sounds now were the faint clatter of dishes in the kitchen and the occasional rustling of a newspaper from a lone customer in the corner. Maya Thompson wiped down the counter absent-mindedly, her mind drifting as she replayed the previous night's events. The way Evan had quietly accepted his situation, the way his face had brightened when she placed that plate of pancakes in front of him, it had all stuck with her in a way she hadn't expected. She had always believed that kindness didn't require effort. It was simply how the world should work. But the gratitude in Evan's eyes, the unspoken weight he carried, made her wonder how often people simply passed him by without noticing. A deep voice broke through her thoughts. "I owe you a thank you." Maya startled slightly, turning to see a man standing in the doorway. His presence alone commanded attention. Broad shoulders filled out a tailored navy suit, and the sharp lines of his jaw gave him an air of quiet authority. His eyes, dark and calculating, studied her with the same precision one might use when assessing a business deal. Maya blinked, quickly snapping back to reality. "I'm sorry?" The man took a step forward, placing both hands on the counter as he regarded her. "For what you did for my son last night," he said evenly. "You didn't have to, but you did." So this was Evan's father. Maya hadn't given much thought to what kind of man would leave his son waiting in the cold. Looking at him now, she saw someone who radiated power and control, the type of person who rarely apologized for anything. But in his tone, she detected something else, an unspoken acknowledgement that he wasn't used to people acting without expectation of something in return. She shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. "It wasn't a big deal," she said, wiping the rag across the counter again. "He was just a kid who needed some food." The man, Noah Sinclair, studied her for a long moment before sliding a crisp business card onto the counter. The embossed lettering gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Come to my office tomorrow," he said. "I have a job offer for you." Maya's brows knitted together as she glanced down at the card, then back up at him. "A job?" Noah nodded. You took care of my son like he was your own. That's rare. I think you'd be an asset to my company." Her fingers hovered over the card but didn't pick it up. She didn't know what game this man was playing, but she wasn't about to let herself be someone's charity case. "I don't need charity," she said, folding her arms. Noah's lips twitched slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "It's not charity," he said. "It's an opportunity. Think about it." And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving her staring at the card in her hands. The air in the diner felt heavier after Noah Sinclair walked out, leaving his business card on the counter. Maya stared at it, the bold lettering stark against the pristine white background. Noah Sinclair, CEO, Sinclair Enterprises. The weight of the title alone made her stomach twist. She exhaled, setting down the cleaning rag she hadn't realized she'd been clutching. A job offer? From a billionaire? For what? Being kind? It made no sense. People like him didn't just hand out opportunities to waitresses who worked double shifts to keep their lights on. Her first instinct was to toss the card into the trash. Whatever this was, it couldn't be real. Rich men didn't make decisions like this on a whim. There had to be a catch. But curiosity lingered. A few feet away, her coworker, Denise, nudged her elbow. "What was that about?" she asked, leaning in conspiratorially. Maya sighed. "Apparently, I got a job offer." She flipped the card between her fingers. Denise's eyes widened. "From him?" She glanced toward the door as if Noah might reappear. "That's Noah Sinclair, Maya. Like Noah Sinclair. He practically owns half the city." "I know who he is," Maya muttered. "And you're just standing there like it's a normal Tuesday?" Denise's voice rose. "Girl, do you know how many people would kill for a shot at working for him?" Maya hesitated. The idea of working for a man like Noah, polished, powerful, ruthless, felt like stepping into a completely different world. A world where she didn't belong. "I'm not looking for handouts," she said, more to herself than Denise. Denise scoffed. "Handouts? Do you think billionaires offer jobs to just anyone? There's something he sees in you, Maya. Maybe you should see it too." Maya rolled her eyes, slipping the card into her apron pocket. "I'll think about it." But the truth was, she already knew she would go. If only to find out why a man like Noah Sinclair thought she, of all people, was worth betting on. The next day, Maya stood in front of a towering glass skyscraper, her breath catching in her throat. Sinclair Enterprises. The name alone carried weight. It was the kind of place where deals were made over power lunches, where fortunes were decided in boardrooms lined with leather chairs. And here she was, just a waitress from a small diner, standing at the entrance like an imposter. What the hell am I doing here? She almost turned back. But something stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the feeling that for the first time in her life, someone saw something in her she hadn't seen in herself. Squaring her shoulders, she stepped through the revolving doors. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, glass walls, the scent of expensive cologne and fresh coffee filling the air. Employees in tailored suits strode past her with an air of importance, barely sparing her a glance. She suddenly felt self-conscious about the modest black dress she'd borrowed from Denise, the way her shoes squeaked slightly against the polished floor. The receptionist barely looked up. "Can I help you?" Maya cleared her throat. I have a meeting with Noah Sinclair." At that, the receptionist's gaze flicked up in surprise. "Your name?" "Maya Thompson." The woman typed something into her sleek computer before nodding. "Mr. Sinclair is expecting you. Take the elevator to the top floor." Maya stepped into the mirrored elevator, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. Each ding made her pulse quicken. This is insane. She had no business being here. Then the doors slid open. Noah's office was exactly what she had imagined, sprawling with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The furniture was modern, sleek, and absurdly expensive. But what caught her attention was the man himself, standing by the window, his back to her. "You came." His voice was even, unreadable. "I figured I should at least hear what this is about." She folded her arms. "Why me?" He turned, studying her for a long moment. "Because you did something most people wouldn't." Maya frowned. "I gave your kid pancakes." "No," he said. "You saw him. You treated him like he mattered. That's not something you can teach. And I could use someone like that." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "For what exactly?" Noah crossed the room, placing a file on the desk in front of her. "I need a new personal assistant." Maya stared at him, then at the file. You're joking. I don't joke about business, she huffed out a laugh. I'm a waitress. What do I know about being a personal assistant? You're smart, he said simply. Quick on your feet, good with people, and more importantly, you don't seem to be afraid of me. Her lips pressed together. Maybe I should be. Then he added, the pay is triple what you're making now. That made her pause. Triple? That kind of money could change her life. She could get out of the tiny apartment she could barely afford. She could stop worrying about bills stacking up. Still, doubt gnawed at her. I don't need charity, she muttered. It's not charity, Noah said firmly. It's an opportunity. Think about it. He left the folder on the desk and walked away, leaving her staring at the offer in front of her. Maya didn't move for a long time. This wasn't just a job. It was a door. A door into a world she had never imagined stepping into. And the real question was, did she have the courage to walk through it? Maya sat in the sleek, high-backed chair in front of Noah Sinclair's massive desk, staring at the open folder before her. The words printed inside detailed an offer that seemed too good to be real. A full-time position as his personal assistant, with a salary that was beyond anything she had ever imagined earning. The zeros on the page made her head spin. She had spent her entire adult life scraping by, working long hours for minimum wage, hoping for a break that never seemed to come. And now, in the span of just 24 hours, she had gone from flipping pancakes in a small diner to being offered a job by one of the most powerful men in the city. It felt surreal. I don't get it, she finally said, closing the folder and looking up at Noah. Why me? You could hire anyone. Someone with actual experience in whatever this is. Noah leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze never leaving her. I already told you. I don't just hire people based on resumes. I hire based on instinct. And my instinct tells me that you have something this company needs. Maya folded her arms. And what's that? Grit, integrity, the ability to handle difficult people, like me. His lips twitched slightly, as if he found some amusement in that statement. I've spent years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. You don't seem like the type to do that. Maya hesitated. It was true. She had never been one to hold her tongue, even when it got her into trouble. But working for Noah Sinclair wasn't just some minor career shift. It was stepping into a world where she would constantly be out of her element, where she would be surrounded by people who lived and breathed wealth, power, and influence. She wasn't sure she belonged here. Take the night to think about it, Noah said, standing. But if you say yes, be here at 7 sharp tomorrow morning. Maya stood as well, her fingers still gripping the folder. And if I say no, he shrugged, then you go back to your life. No harm, no foul. But something in his tone told her that if she walked away from this, she would always wonder what might have been. That night, Maya lay awake in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling. The folder rested on the nightstand beside her, the offer weighing heavily on her mind. Could she really do this? She thought about Evan, the quiet way he had accepted being left alone in that diner, the way his face had lit up over something as simple as a plate of pancakes. If nothing else, working for Noah would mean getting to see Evan again. And then there was the money. Triple her current income. She could finally move out of this cramped apartment, stop living paycheck to paycheck, and maybe even start saving for something beyond just surviving. By the time the sun rose, her decision was made. Maya's first day at Sinclair Enterprises was like stepping into another universe. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, the lobby filled with men and women in crisp suits, their heels clicking against marble floors as they moved with purpose. The receptionist barely spared her a glance as she directed Maya toward the executive elevator. When the doors slid open on the top floor, Maya stepped out into a world of pristine offices, sleek conference rooms, and assistants who barely concealed their curiosity as they watched her walk by. She quickly realized that while Noah might have seen something in her, the rest of the office didn't share his confidence. The whispers started immediately. Who is she? She has no experience. She won't last a week. Maya forced herself to ignore them. She had dealt with worse before. Noah wasted no time throwing her into the deep end. Her days became a whirlwind of schedules, meetings, and managing the constant stream of demands that came with being the assistant to a man as powerful as Noah Sinclair. The workload was overwhelming, the expectations relentless. She made mistakes. On her third day, she accidentally double-booked a meeting with a major investor. On her fifth, she spilled coffee on an important contract. Each time, she braced herself for Noah's anger, but instead, he simply gave her a look that said he expected her to do better. And she did. She learned quickly. She learned how to navigate corporate politics, how to read the unspoken cues in meetings, how to anticipate Noah's needs before he even voiced them. And most of all, she learned how to stand her ground. One afternoon, when she overheard Noah berating an employee for a minor mistake, she spoke up without thinking. "You know, not everyone works like a machine," she said. "People need space to grow." The room went silent. The executives in the meeting froze, their eyes darting between her and Noah as if they expected him to fire her on the spot. But Noah simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. And then, just for a moment, she saw it. Respect. From that day forward, something shifted between them. Noah still pushed her hard, but he also listened. When she spoke in meetings, he didn't dismiss her. When she suggested ideas, he considered them. Maya wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was becoming something else, and not everyone was happy about it. The murmurs in the office grew louder as Maya continued to climb the ranks. No one could understand how she had gone from being a complete outsider to becoming one of the closest people to Noah Sinclair. Some whispered that she must have had connections. Others speculated that there was something more going on between her and Noah. Maya ignored the rumors, focusing on her work. But not everyone was content to let her rise without a fight. One morning, she walked into the boardroom only to find herself at the center of a storm she hadn't seen coming. The boardroom was eerily silent, save for the distant hum of the city below. Maya stood in the center of the long, polished conference table, her hands clenched at her sides, eyes darting between the executives seated around her. The tension in the air was suffocating, like a noose tightening around her throat with every second that passed. She could hear the whispers, the rustling of papers, the disapproving glances cast in her direction. Then came Noah's voice, low, cold, and devoid of the usual patience he reserved for her. "Tell me the truth," he said, standing at the head of the table. "Did you do it?" Maya's breath caught. She had prepared for a lot in this job, the hours, the corporate power plays, the condescending stares of executives who thought she didn't belong. But she had never expected this. Betrayal. Her throat tightened as she met Noah's piercing gaze. "Do what?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. Noah's jaw tensed. He slid a folder across the table. "Sensitive company information was leaked to a competitor. Your login credentials were used to access the files." His gaze didn't waver. "So tell me, Maya, were you the one who leaked them?" Maya's heart pounded. Someone had set her up. She knew it the second the words left his mouth. "No," she said firmly. "I didn't do anything." A murmur rippled through the room, a few executives exchanging knowing glances. "Then explain this," one of them said, tapping a printed document in front of him. "The logs show that your account accessed the files 3 nights ago after hours." Maya shook her head. "I wasn't even in the office that night. Check the security footage." "We did," another executive cut in, his expression unreadable. "It was accessed remotely." Maya's stomach twisted. A setup, and they were all so willing to believe it. Her gaze snapped back to Noah. Of all people, she expected him to believe her, to know her well enough to understand she would never betray his trust, no matter how many enemies she had made climbing the corporate ladder. But the hesitation in his eyes sent a sharp sting through her chest. She forced herself to stand tall, refusing to let them see her break. "If you actually knew me, you wouldn't have to ask," she said, her voice unwavering. A long, agonizing silence filled the room. Then Noah exhaled. "Until we get to the bottom of this, you're suspended." The words hit her like a slap. Suspended. Not fired, not fully cast aside, but placed in limbo. A polite way of saying, "We don't trust you." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat and gave a single nod. "Fine." She turned on her heel and walked out, but she wasn't walking away from this fight. The truth comes out. Maya didn't waste time feeling sorry for herself. If there was one thing she had learned in her years of working for Noah Sinclair, it was that power in the corporate world wasn't just about money. It was about information. And if someone had framed her, they had made one crucial mistake. They underestimated her. She reached out to Isabel, one of the few colleagues who had treated her with kindness since she arrived at Sinclair Enterprises. Together, they combed through security logs, analyzed timestamps, and checked background access points. And then, they found it. A small but critical detail buried in the login reports, an IP address that didn't match Maya's usual logins. It belonged to someone else. One of the executives who had dismissed her from the start. Maya's hands clenched around the report. Gotcha. 2 days later, Maya stormed back into the boardroom, her head held high, armed with irrefutable proof. The executives, who had so quickly cast doubt on her, now sat in stunned silence as she laid out her findings. The evidence was undeniable. The real traitor had orchestrated the leak, using her as a scapegoat. Noah sat quietly, listening as she spoke. But when she finally finished, he turned his gaze to the guilty party. "You're fired," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. As security escorted the man out, Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. Noah turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "I owe you an apology," he admitted. Maya folded her arms. "Damn right, you do." For the first time since this ordeal started, something like amusement flickered in his gaze. But then, his expression sobered. "You didn't just clear your name," he said. "You proved you're smarter than half the people in this room." Then, in front of the very same executives who had doubted her, he pushed a contract across the table. "Consider this your promotion," he said. Maya looked at the title. Vice President of Strategic Development. Her chest tightened. She had fought to earn her place, and now there was no denying it. She belonged here, and no one would ever question that again. Years had passed since the day Maya first stepped into Sinclair Enterprises, uncertain and out of place. Now, she stood at the center of a grand auditorium, dressed in a sleek navy suit, her name displayed boldly on the screen behind her. Maya Thompson, Vice President of Strategic Development, Sinclair Enterprises. The room was packed with aspiring entrepreneurs, young professionals, and business leaders, all gathered to hear her speak. She never thought she'd be the one standing on a stage like this. She had come from nothing, fought against every obstacle, and proved that success wasn't just for those who were born into privilege. But she didn't just rise. She made sure others could rise with her. Through the Thompson Initiative, she created mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, scholarships for single mothers looking to restart their careers, and outreach efforts that helped those who had been overlooked, just like she once had been. She had built something bigger than herself. As she looked out at the faces in the crowd, her gaze landed on a familiar one. Evan Sinclair, now a confident young man, watching her with quiet admiration. She smiled. After her speech, as the audience erupted into applause, Noah Sinclair approached her, his rare smile breaking through his usually stoic expression. "You built something incredible," he said. Maya glanced at Evan, then back at Noah. "We both did." Noah chuckled. "You've always been the stubborn one." "And you've always underestimated me," she teased. He nodded, conceding the point. "Never again." As she turned back toward the crowd, shaking hands and greeting young professionals who looked up to her, Maya realized that this was what mattered. Not the titles, not the money, but the impact. The way a single act of kindness had led to a chain of events that transformed lives. And to think, it had all started with a plate of pancakes. Before you go, remember this. Opportunities often come in unexpected ways. Sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time. But more often, it's about making the right choice when that moment arrives. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring content about resilience, success, and the power of kindness, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's always more to learn, more stories to tell, and more lives to change, starting with yours. Hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey, because every action, no matter how small, creates a ripple, and you never know where that ripple might lead.